Hey everybody, welcome back to Music Theory Logic. My name's Andrew, and today's going to be another music theory breakdown. Today we're going to look at the song Levitating by Dua Lipa and DaBaby. Let's go into the logic session. Sorry about that. Artist names nowadays, so many to keep track of. Alright, so this song is like on the top of the United States viral charts. So hopefully you like this song. I'm going to go ahead and play my instrumental recreation of the song. I'm not using any of the original sounds from the track. This is all my recreation. I did it mostly in MIDI so that we could look at the notes and I could explain the music theory. I did additionally record a guitar because this song has a really live guitar sound in it, so that was a fun challenge. Without further ado, here's my recreation of Levitating. Here comes the hook. Nice. I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. Notice I didn't comp that take correctly. Cool. So hopefully that was a close enough version of this instrumental for you to stick around. Again, it's not really worth my time to make these like perfect, but I want to make sure I get the notes right so we can talk about the music theory. So what is music theory? It's really the science of how music notes work together. It involves chords, otherwise known as like harmonies, combination of more than one note, and scales. And harmonies, the way we're going to understand chords in a lot of these videos because the chords come from scales is based on the scale. So for this song, it is in the key of B minor. B minor has the relative major of D major. It has two accidentals, C sharp and F sharp. I'm going to go ahead and play that, and then we'll look at the chords. Cool. So again, the most basic minor key is going to be A minor. Cool thing about the computer is you could literally draw the white keys from A to A like this, and then you could drag it up or down to whatever minor key you want to be in. Again, we're in B minor today, so I got a B, and those black keys are instantly there. That's because all of these scales have the same formulas or distance from one note to the second or the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Cool. So the chords of this song are a B minor 7, followed by an F sharp minor 7, followed by an E minor 7, followed by another B minor 7. If we were to call those chords numbers instead of the full names based on the number of scale degree that they are, we have a 1 minor 7 built on that note. We have a 5 minor 7 built on that note, the 5th. We have a 4 minor 7 built on that note. So notice all of these chords are minor 7ths. Minor 7ths are really awesome chords. They're quite magical. I don't want to digress, but I was in a jazz masterclass like over a decade ago that was ran by Pat Martino, famous jazz guitarist, and he was talking about how because of a minor 7th versatility, we can use it in improvising in a lot of different styles, and I'll show you what he was talking about. So a minor 7th has both a minor chord and a major chord. If we look at the bottom, that's a B minor chord. If we look at the top, that's actually a D major chord, D, F sharp, and A. So basically, it's the minor 7 is the B minor plus this note A. So again, it has both pretty like the minor harmony, but also has some major sound to it. I really love the sound of minor 7ths. Let's hear these one more time. Cool. So minor 7ths already go a long way to make the song feel a little bit more like funk oriented or slightly more timeless, old school. It doesn't feel as just like a straight pop song. So that's partly because of the harmonies. And mainly because of the bass line. So if I were looking for videos about this song, I'd probably be the most curious about the bass line, but and I will cover that. So we have very limited instruments happening. Let's start with the drums. We basically have 4 on the floor happening with a standard snare, so on beat 2 and 4. The second time, but every other measure, we get this clap fill right there. It's on the same rhythm that the snare would be on, so beat 4, but then the 8th note right before that, so be like 3.5. Cool. And then our cymbals are basically doing an upbeat or the every other 8th note happening, but then the end of 4 is going to have a slight 30-second fill into that. So every box is a 16th note, so half of the 16th would be a 32nd note. So that's what that looks like right before the 4th beat. If we listen to the drum pattern on its own, it's default Logic drums. It's not super great sounding on its own, but let's hear that and watch the MIDI. One other thing that's important about the drums is that the snare is slightly behind the beat. What that does is it creates what we would call a flam. A flam is like a grace note in percussion, so really quickly. So these aren't happening at the same time, but more like one right after the other. That works really well for a bunch of different reasons. On a side note, if you've seen the master class put on by dance music legend Deadmau5, he talks about the fact that these drum hits have something called transients. Transients are like impacts or really thick things that happen right in the beginning. And because the computer is so perfect, if I were to put these snares just like right in time with it, those transients would perhaps be conflicting. And so by putting it slightly out of time, it's actually going to help your mix to begin with. But then this far out of time is audible. And if you go back and listen to that song, you're going to notice that the snare feels like there's a grace note happening each time, and that's what's producing that. Cool. Let's go on to the main thing most of you are probably hoping for is the bass line. So the bass line is basically, or I don't want to say basically, it's fundamentally embellished, or the root notes, the bottom notes of these chords I showed you, with other stuff added. So a really common style in like funk bass is to use an octave. So the first notes we get are B. We have a B minor 7, so that's not surprising. We go up to B, the same note, on the last 16th note. That does that like syncopation, 1 1 So that's the B B. Then it goes down to an E. This note's in our scale, but not in our chord of the moment. This is kind of a passing tone, and we'll notice we get a lot of those right before the next beat. So this chord progression is happening on a half note rhythm. So here's our B minor 7. These next two quarter notes are going to be our F sharp minor 7. So we basically have the F sharp note happening. We get that same pattern of the octave up. Then we get a really cool chromatic walk down. So this note is not in our scale, F natural, but E is where we're going. So a lot of times in funk influenced music, there's chromatic motion, or even the blues. Chromatic motion like feels dissonant. The reason we call that chromatic is the chromatic scale is just like every note. So anytime you're going down by like every note, typically people call that the chromatic scale or a chromatic run. So that's what's happening there. Then here is where we're at the E minor chord. We get E, the last 16th note, up an octave to E. So this is all consistent. Notice that. Didn't mean to do that. That's really important because basically for every chord that we have, we do that thing where we play the low note, and then on the last 16th note, we play the octave up from that same note. And then halfway through, or at the end of the half note, we get some sort of passing note that's not in our chord. So the next one, when we're on E minor, we get an A. That's the closest scale tone to B. That's the same thing that happened in the first fill. So from B minor to F sharp minor 7, we use an E. That's the closest below. So I've mentioned this before in these videos, but music is really organized noise. And so the more patterns or more repetition that we have, the more listeners can understand or digest the music. Regardless of what kind of music you like, I would venture to guess there's some sort of repetition in it, unless you like listening to avant-garde film scores. Most music, whether it's jazz or it's classical music or it's rock and roll music or EDM, dance music, trap music, hip hop, all that music has some sort of repetition built into it. And that is what's happening. So basically, that's the bass line I played. It's going to repeat here the second time, but notice we get some slight variation. So the first half note's the same. The second one is almost the same. Instead of doing our F sharp for this eighth note as well, we go instantly to that chromatic walk down we were doing, F natural. Only we do that on an eighth note octave pattern. So note out of scale, up an octave, note out of scale, back down. Finally, that repeats. We get a different fill at the end. We're basically going A back to B like we did before, only down an octave, right? So I guess we do that same thing in that octave, A to B, and then up an octave, and it's B, A sharp, B. So this note we could define in terms of another scale it's borrowed from, like harmonic minor, but because we already have chromatic motion in it, I don't think we really even have to do that. We could just say that like these chromatic notes add to this funk feel that the bass line really gets across. Cool. We almost get the exact same 4-measure phrase that repeats, only this chromatic fill doesn't happen at the very last of a group of 8 measures. Let's watch that bass line and listen to it. Cool. So we've talked about really the bread and butter of this song, which is the drums and bass. It's very much feels like a funk house sort of track. So that's the main bread and butter. The other layer you're hearing is that vocalish chop sample. I'm using 2 different layers of Arturia synths. This Logic symbol can be a little bit confusing. If you want to change those in your Logic Pro user, you can hit Control. And I could go to like sound effect or keyboards, give it like a synth look, and give this one a different synth look. Not that it matters. I meant to do that before you guys were watching. Let's go ahead and give this electric keyboard sound or picture. Cool. So we've got a couple extra layers. So what I was trying to talk about was that vocal-ish thing. I'm using 2 different channels of Arturia synths that are basically synthesized vocal resembling sounds. On its own, it's not going to sound super great. In the beginning of the song, we get this sort of fill thing that happens. It's going B, D sharp, or B, D. So 1, 3, 1, 7 down to A, and then 1, 1, 1, 7. All of these notes are in our B minor scale. It works to kind of set the ambiance or the space before everything else drops. When everything else comes in, our vocal chop line kind of changes. We're walking down the B minor scale from the 5, so we're going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 5, 4, 3, 2. Let's hear that on its own. Nice. Let's add that bass line in here. What? Cool, we're almost there. We have a really, really subtle piano sound that is basically doubling up on those root notes. Super simple. So it's going B, F sharp, E, back to B. Also repeating that note on the last eighth note. It's on an eighth note pattern. Cool, let's get rid of Discord. So that layer goes a long way to help tie the harmony in. So while the bass is moving, this the piano kind of holds it down with the root note. Cool. That's basically what is happening there. And then finally, we have an organ that happens, or more like a pad synth. This happens at the hook. This goes back to what I was sort of talking before. On the chords, we're actually spelling like major chords from the tops of these minor sevenths. So we have a B minor 7 for the first chord. The top major chord there is an A major, or a D major. Sorry, I said that in the beginning. That's what we get here. Then we basically get an A major, which is like the top of an F sharp minor chord. Then we get the notes B, C, G. So is that the same? No, it's not. Yeah, it is. I'm having a brain fart. So that's a G major chord, and that's the top of our E minor 7th, and then back to the D major, which is the top of the B minor 7. Cool. So that really tells us all of the layers minus the guitar. For those of you guitarists, I was basically playing minor 7th chord at the 7th fret on the low E string, and then an F sharp minor 7th on the 9th fret of the A string, and then an E minor 7th on the 7th fret of the A string. A little bit of funk rhythm. That on its own sounds like this. You're hearing some effects. That's CLA guitars. I'm reamping using a really subtle slap delay. That goes a long way to make that help come through the mix. Nice. That's basically everything. I'm going to play it from the chorus, and we're going to watch the bass line because, again, this is the most sophisticated, the craziest thing that's happening in the song, and it's the loudest in the mix, and it really goes the long way to making this that funk house kind of vibe that I was talking about. Let's hear that. Awesome. And that basically does that. Hopefully it was helpful watching the bass line, and hopefully you found that music theory breakdown to be helpful in general. Again, scales and chords are found in pretty much every style of music that people like to listen to, even music that people don't like to listen to. The scales that are more common that we hear in popular music, like major and minor scales, we just run into them a lot more. So in this song, we saw the B minor scale that had the two black keys of C sharp and F sharp. We had 3 different chords in the song: B minor 7, F sharp minor 7, E minor 7. Hopefully this helped you to better understand the bass line, which again, in my opinion, if I were looking for a video like this, that's what I would be most interested in. Definitely sounds like a live player. I did not play that, one, because I'm not as good of a bassist as I am a guitar player, but also because I like to be able to show you the notes. So if you found this helpful, you'd help me out by subscribing to the channel. And if you do, I will see you guys next time. Happy music making. And as always, feel free to link to some of your music in a comment or something. I'd love to check it out.